One of the most famous movies in the world was almost never released. The only thing that saved it was a secret notebook.
Hitchcock designed, he chokes, frozen time, hit hard and bloody, gun almost against Sollozzo's head, really close. Get this for the audience.
But to tell you this story, we have to start at the beginning. The year was 1969. Mario Puzo's novel The Godfather was a sensation. Overnight, the unknown Puzo became a national celebrity. When studios jumped at the chance to adapt it, Puzo insisted on writing the screenplay. The studio was reluctant at first to let the author adapt his own book. He had no screenwriting experience, and the book was very large. Their concern was that he wouldn't be able to cut down his 600-page novel into a 120-page screenplay. One night, as producer Al Ruddy explained this to Mario, trying to negotiate with him, Puzo grabbed his copy of The Godfather and threw it on the carpeted floor. "You have my word of honor that I will never look at that book again. Mario, you just got the job." What seemed like a giant victory quickly turned into a nightmare. Mario began to realize that he didn't have as much control as he thought he did. The initial drafts of the screenplay were being pulled apart in many different directions due to studio demands, compromising the story's essence. Paramount pushed Puzo to emphasize whatever was fastest and cheapest to film, especially the sex. "Start off with a love scene between Michael and Kay," Al Ruddy instructed Puzo in an early draft. "Al, you can't start The Godfather off with a love scene." But Ruddy insisted, and Puzo felt as though he had no choice. "I went back upstairs and read the contract, and sure enough, it said the producer can tell the writer how to write the script. I had to start off the movie with a youthful love scene. And so I wrote it, and it was lousy." And the notes from the studio execs didn't stop there. I wonder if it's entirely clear why The Godfather is so ardently opposed to narcotics. I hope we can find a way to keep Luca Brasi alive. The restaurant scene in which Michael murders Sollozzo lacks suspense. Kay again is too naive here. She must know about the mafia and about Michael by this time. Removing these elements completely changed the story. The film adaptation of The Godfather was already heading in a downward spiral before it even began. Enter Francis Ford Coppola.
Francis Ford Coppola?
Coppola!
One of the most legendary film directors of all time. But at this point, a fairly unproven 30-year-old director with a lot of failure in his past. When Mario heard Francis's vision for the movie, he knew he really got it. But Coppola saw very clearly the train wreck that was beginning to happen. I liked Mario much more than his script. And judging from the opinions all around him, he pretty much did what he was told to do. If the studios wanted more sex scenes, Mario would write more sex scenes. If the studios wanted to change the setting to modern day in order to save money on production, Mario would change the setting to modern day. When Mario asked Coppola to write the screenplay together, Coppola simply said no. He was going to write the screenplay himself. That's when I knew he was really a director. However, if Coppola was going to use this film to relaunch his career, he had to steer the ship around and make sure that it didn't crash and burn before it even began. To navigate this, Coppola turned to a unique tool, a meticulously detailed notebook. If you've watched a lot of movies before, you probably know that not all adaptations are that great. Many aren't that faithful to the novel. A lot of them feel very surface level, where the soul of the original work just isn't there. Coppola was extremely aware of this. As he read the novel for the first time, Coppola identified the most important story in the book and its central theme, a story of succession and power.
Much of the book fell away in my mind, revealing a story that was a metaphor for American capitalism in the tale of a great king with 3 sons. The oldest was given his passion and aggressiveness, the second his sweet nature and childlike qualities, and the third his intelligence, cunning, and coldness.
From there, he began taking notes of whatever details supported that theme in the book.
Those are the initial instincts about what you thought was good or what you didn't understand or what you thought was bad. And so I took the book and I actually wrote my comments right on the book itself.
He then took his copy of The Godfather and made what he calls a prompt book.
Sort of an old tradition from theater. And basically you take a sheet of loose leaf paper, and I sat there myself and I cut out this hole in the middle of the page, and then I pulled my book apart that I had made those comments on, and I pasted every page of the novel onto sheets of paper like this. The object of this was to give you the large area around the text for the many notes a stage manager would need to enter. As I sat there before the novel, I thought I would prepare such a master control, not so much for the performance of a play, but for everything that I would do in terms of trying to get the essence, the best stuff out of the novel.
He began the notebook by dividing up the novel into 50 different scenes. And for each scene, he analyzed its content into 5 key criteria. Number 1 was synopsis, which was 1 to 2 paragraphs about what actually happens in the scene.
Michael comes home and he talks to his father about pasta and they do such and such. I knew that when I finished, if I just put the synopsis parts of each section together, I'd have the embryo of the script, which I did and which it was. The script was based on the synopsis of each section.
Number 2 was the times. How does the context of the time period that the story takes place in specifically affect the scene?
I felt it was very important that the film be set in the 40s, after the war, because that was a very peculiar time in America.
Slant some of the dialogue toward the fact that the nation was in sort of a turning point after the war. Just the imagery of kids playing with war toys or dressing up like soldiers. Number 3 was imagery
and tone. What did I see out of the page of the novel that I could latch onto in terms of the visualization of it? What would it feel like?
Number 4 was the core, the reason why the scene exists in the story.
Every scene should have a core that was at the root of that scene, and the reason the scene was in the piece was only validated if you expressed that core, if you hit its essence and why the scene was there. It was appealing to me that if you nailed the clarity of that core in each scene, the audience would have gotten that, and that would form the spin of the experience for them.
And finally, number 5 was pitfalls.
Which was to say, how can I screw this up? What are dangers, things that you want to avoid, or dangers that you very easily could find yourself in?
Like cliches, contrived plot points, or characteristics.
Italians who would talk like this.
Immediately, this put The Godfather back on track. Instead of randomly cutting scenes at the whims of studio execs who only care about sex and money, Coppola had turned a 600-page novel into easily digestible pieces. No important elements lost, and no meaningless pieces kept in that would bloat the screenplay. However, the production of The Godfather was nothing short of hell. But before we get into that part of the story, I asked myself this question. What would a modern-day Godfather's notebook look like? Because I love the methods that Coppola used, but I don't necessarily want to carry around a big, clunky notebook. That's when I turned to Milanote. Milanote is a tool for organizing your creative projects in a visual way. So to test this, I began turning The Godfather's notebook into a Milanote project. Just like Coppola, I pasted each page of the novel and wrote notes on top of it. Where Coppola was only able to use text to describe what he envisioned for the film, I was able to paste images, audio clips, and even videos directly into my notes. With Milanote's board templates and the ability to create multiple levels of boards, I was able to get complete control on this project. And instead of carrying a big clunky notebook around sets like Coppola did, collaboration in Milanote is simple. You can invite your colleagues and clients to gather important feedback and collaborate with them in real time. I've personally been using Milanote for over a year now, and if you'd like to give it a try, Milanote is available for free with no time limit. Sign up using the link in the description and start your next creative project now. Let's get back to the video.
It was just the most frightening and depressing experience I think I've ever had.
There was a constant war between Coppola and the studios. So much so that the studios literally sent a spy to be on set and watch Coppola's every single move and report it back to them. These constant problems set the production back sometimes days or even weeks behind schedule. The studio was getting impatient, and even members of the crew began to doubt Coppola's ability as the captain of the ship. Where did they find this asshole director? The crew member asked, adding that the film was a load of shit and the asshole director didn't know what he was doing. Every scene was important, but there was one pivotal scene that really counted. The killing scene. In the story, this is where Michael, our protagonist, transforms into becoming the heir of the Godfather by murdering those who tried to kill his father. This is the scene that would either get Al Pacino and Coppola fired, or it would make the film great. As they began filming, the problems began piling on. Pacino sprained a ligament on the 4th day of shooting the film, which required him to use crutches for the next 2 weeks. They had to change the locations of the restaurant more than once. And Pacino was struggling, tripping over his Italian dialogue, which required doing the scene again and again. On top of all of this, there was a much bigger problem. Coppola discovered there was a plot to get rid of him. Multiple members of the production team were planning to get rid of him as director as quickly as they could. Coppola had to act fast. He knew that studios rarely fire directors on weekdays. They'll always wait till the weekend, he said. Firing a director on a Friday gives the replacement director the weekend to take over. So I took a real chance. He counted the conspirators, 6 of them. I fired them all on Wednesday. This gave Coppola some more time, but he still had to prove that his film was actually going to be good. As Coppola began shooting, he would reference back to this notebook to help guide him when making decisions. In fact, he actually referenced this notebook more than the script itself.
I didn't even need a script because I could have made the movie just from this notebook.
Coppola wanted to make it perfect, so he opened up his notebook and began to get to work. Imagery and tone, incredible suspense and tension. The empty restaurant with the 3 men almost in the middle of the room around the small table exposed. The blood on the waiter's jacket. The mist of blood hanging in and coloring the air.
Design this scene shot for shot.
Hitchcock design. He chokes.
Frozen time. Hit hard and bloody.
His fork froze in midair.
Gun almost against Sollozzo's head, really close. Get this for the audience.
With this clear vision of what the scene was supposed to be, it allowed Coppola to make decisions without losing the essence of the story. Pacino reworked the scene on the fly, ad-libbing a switch from Italian to English. He looks over at McCluskey, busy with his dinner and obviously not paying attention, then turns to Sollozzo and says in English,
"What I want, what's most important to me, is that I have a guarantee. No more attempts on my father's life."
After finally getting the scene down, they rushed the edit over to the producers in the studio. Robert Evans saw Al Pacino's transformation from the angel-faced college boy into a cold-blooded killer. It wasn't just good, it was fucking great. It was a level of genius that Robert Evans couldn't deny. He didn't love Francis Coppola, but he loved movies, and here was proof that there might be a great one in The Godfather. The footage of Michael killing Sollozzo and McCluskey in the restaurant saved Coppola's job, along with Al Pacino's, and ultimately, the movie. Production ended, and Coppola jumped into the first edit of this film with his team of editors. After a few weeks of work, they came to a terrible realization. The film wasn't working. It was too long, too dark, and too boring. The studio had poured so much money into this film at this point that if they wanted to recover their losses, they had to act fast. The studio demanded that they cut the film down from its original length of 2 hours and 53 minutes. Almost 40 minutes had to be cut. In this moment, Coppola complies. He doesn't want to lose this now. With the help of the editors, they cut the film down to its bare necessities at 2 hours and 15 minutes. But the new cut was worse. The movie is longer at 2 hours and 15 than it was at 2 hours and 53. The picture stinks. You shot a great film. Where the is it? In the kitchen with your spaghetti? Because it sure ain't on the screen. With the backing of one of the producers, Coppola was given one last chance to get it right. Given permission to add in some of the scenes that were cut. In this final edit, Coppola and the editors started adding back in the pieces that gave the characters authenticity. They stretched out the scenes and let the audience sit in the world a little bit longer. And if I had to bet, do you know what I'd say was probably at the center of the editing room? Coppola's secret notebook. the notebook that contained the soul of the story. The pieces of the story that may have seemed unimportant to the untrained eye, but what Coppola knew was going to turn this simple gangster story into the cinematic masterpiece that it is today. The secret notebook was the guiding light. And with this final edit, everyone finally agreed. They had made the movie that they were searching to make in the first place. Today, The Godfather is revered as one of the greatest films of all time, and it's all because of a secret notebook that Coppola used to stay on track and not get distracted by the whims of others when problems arose. If you're a storyteller, use this as a lesson. Create a plan for what is the central theme of your story, and use that as a guiding light when you're making decisions about what to include and what to take away from your story. And if you simply enjoy storytelling, now you know what goes on behind the curtain.